One of my biggest references in architecture, drawing, and design is Gabriel Yeganyan. He's a concept artist working in the video game industry as well as an educator, currently teaching at Concept Design Academy. He'll be teaching a course this term. I'll have information both in the description as well as in the end of the video. But one thing that strikes me the most in his work is how he can use simple structure and a lot of thinking and planning to really construct something that is very detailed and gets to a beautiful result in the end. If we look at this image in the screen, first of all, we're going to see that he has done the top view for this specific construction. We have discussed this in my video about James Spec and functionality in video game design. So it's really important to understand that every architecture is made to be lived in, walked through, used as a ritual site, or in this case, a temple based on classical architecture and so on. So understanding functionality, and that's really easier to convey in a top view, will go a long way in believability, as well as being a way for us to plan out and to make mistakes and correct mistakes easier in the process of creating this environment. When it goes to modeling down the line, it's going to be way harder and more expensive to make changes, especially in a production setup. So here is where the planning goes, and we can definitely see a lot of that in his work. His work has great drawing, great structure. If we look at this structure over here, it's basically a big box with a lot of cuts all over. If you've seen my video on how to study perspective, that's what I say of tools and understanding how to find the middle way in creating like triangles and primitives in perspective. That's the basis of dynamic sketching as well. So you can have all of this simplified to a very basic primitive. Some cuts here and there are going to use ellipses. So we're going to have an ellipse here that is going with this minor axis to that vanishing point that is on the other side. The isometric view also helps to understand the space and to show form overall. We can also see another curve right here, an arch. So this kind of construction will also have another ellipse, now with more of a 3-point minor axis, but this will be the arch for this point of the structure. It's harder to construct, so it's great that there is a structure here in the middle to break that down so that you don't need to build this kind of circular staircase. You could, and definitely you could do that in a 3D software such as Blender and so on. So it's going to be easier to have that in the end. So here, simple structures, simple construction, but very thought out design. Another archway. So it's a combination of boxes, ellipses, cylinders. You could say pyramids. So triangular form structures and so on. So a lot of simple structure, some shadow projection here as well. We're going to talk about that later on, but that really emphasizes form and creates a better readability for the overall image. So he uses a lot of vegetation here, almost kind of in a landscape design sense. We're going to talk about design a little later, but I want to focus here today more on drawing. So the amazing like hatching going on here to really help emphasize the direction of the planes to some extent, as well as unify some regions. So I love the shadow here. I do believe there is a little bit of overpainting and correction of values in Photoshop. So yeah, that's my assumption here. I'll be able to attend his class this semester, so I'll definitely see if there isn't any correction on this, and that, not that this is a problem, because that's better. That can unify a lot of the values and really enhance the overall readability of the image. So going forward, I would love to suggest some studies and structure for you all. One of them is two tutorials by the Foundation Group, both by Daniel Park. So it's great to see, as we were saying before, the overall boxy kind of structure, as well as arches, cylinders. So we can see here a cylinder, and the overall simple construction. Cuts and using multiple primitives to build something that is complex. The other tutorial is this one, way more complex, focus on almost like theme park design, with a lot of fantasy stuff and so on. So it's both of them are really awesome. I love the shapes here, and the line work emphasizing silhouettes. It's really great. I'll definitely have a link for both in the description. But basically, it's, as we said, simple construction taken to a next level. And that's something that I really need to improve in my work, and I hope to really get from Gabriel's course. There is a video of him drawing. It's very low res, to be honest. It's from Concept Design Academy. I'll have a link in the description, but I took some screenshots. It's more of an Egyptian structure, but it's really interesting to see the first step here. Even in the low res, we can really see the boxes forms. He's thinking probably plan view and understanding the overall form and shape from the top view standpoint, and everything is kind of getting more closer, narrower, and more intimate, as a lot of the Egyptian temples used to have. Even the ceiling tends to get lower and lower, so the overall space gets smaller and more intimate. This is, if you read about architecture history, this is very well documented. I'll add a book later on, Global History of Architecture. It's great to kind of get this vocabulary and the functionality to bring to your own designs later on. So a basic structure that gets more and more detailed, using a lot of the visual language and visual library from this era, using a lot of references as well, and sometimes taking artistic liberties, such as this one, to really create on top of that. So a lot of the pillars and the pillar language for Egyptian architecture, and going on and on, adding more details, adding some vegetation, adding a figure for scale, adding statues that really represent what the art looked like in that era, adding palm trees to represent the space geography where this is done and added. As well as some vegetation down here, and more value, contrast, value for readability overall. So really great example by him, really informative on that side. So you can see that the tutorials that we saw before are really on top of the discussion that we're having here. We can see another drawing by him, almost close to what we've seen in that demo. A lot of boxes, as I said before, a lot of pillars, understanding the division here. So you are able to have 3 pillars on each side and have symmetry. That's super important. Symmetry here, thinking of the center line of this overall structure and how that relates to the overall scale of the place. So everything is really thought out here. The statues, even under construction in here, the vegetation values, control, everything is really, really great and really, really thought out. I love the hatching, as I said before. A lot of influence in my own work. I follow also John Sweeney a lot, another amazing artist that has a great hatching work on environment and architecture drawings. So a lot to learn from that. I'll bring a video on him down the line. So a lot of architecture details. This is artistic exploration as well. So artistic license to really have this being higher. That's not usual. At least I haven't seen temples that have this kind of setup. You have the statues going on. You have at Karnak Temple, you have a lot of repeating statues in the entrance. So bringing a lot of that visual library here. This almost looks like a temple. I don't remember the name right now, but there is a temple that is really close to this with a higher entrance walls as well as the pillars. So a lot of information conveyed and combined and enhanced in this design work. And as I said before, shadow projection and understanding planes of light versus shadow is really important. So I would love to suggest other tutorials and books that are going to be interesting on that sense. These set of tutorials by John Park are really great to understand overall shadow projection from simple primitives and applying that to more complex situations. 2 books really great on shadow projection theory, Frame Perspective 2 by Marcos Matteo Mestri, as well as How to Render by Scott Robertson. You can learn a lot on that, and that will really help your studies grow. And now on using what you've learned before to do some thumbnails, explorations, and finalizing. You definitely don't get to this kind of final result without having either a lot of experience or a lot of exploration in thumbnails, so you can get a great result. Exploring some of my drawings here, the big thing I want to try and learn from him during the course and use more on my drawings. My drawings tend to be mostly from observation. This, I brought an image from the internet. It's not the exact image, but you can definitely see the resemblance in there. So I was straight up copying, mostly in a 2D sense. So you can see that some lines in perspective are not really working that well. They are close, but they don't have that overall construction that having the understanding of perspective that I do have, I could have done some of these lines way better to convey the overall basic construction and structure behind something that is human made and architecture in nature. Even like the way that this boxier pillar is positioned on the big pillar. If we look at the image here, it's right in the middle there. So I don't have that working very well as the other pillars that are down there in the back. This definitely has its value, so I'm trying to understand how to create a better visual pleasing image, but having more of a three-dimensional sense and even changing a little bit the way we're looking at this, we could have a more kind of bird's eye view, looking down, isometric kind of view. So I would definitely need to understand more the construction and replicate that in a different viewpoint. The same here with this museum in São Paulo, Brazil. So I love some of the suggestion of details I could get here as well. You see a lot of the influence on the hatching from a lot of my drawing influences, a little bit of figures here to showcase scale and so on, but not that defined. It could be better. And the overall values and separation of planes of light versus shadow, we can definitely see in his work going back that is way more emphasized, and definitely I could learn some of that in here. This is another drawing of mine. Once again, the construction could be better in terms of perspective if I had just done some of the lines and broken this overall structure into something that is more boxy and focuses more on primitives. It could go a long way having this kind of box structure in here, and how this relates to this smaller box in here that can be simplified to almost like a triangle or the overall structure, and it would go down here, and this is the triangle going here. So we can definitely go a long way simplifying this, understanding the archway and where it goes, and this pillar comes in front of that, and so on. As I said before, having a 2D good understanding of the relationships between angles and verticals and horizontals and spaces and all of that, I'll get to a final result that can convey this kind of three-dimensional sense, but understanding perspective and using that will definitely be really helpful. So just as I said before, he's going to be teaching this term. The class starts tomorrow. Depending on the day that you're watching this, it might have already started. It's on the 29th of June, 2023. But keep an eye out. CDA is always putting out his courses almost every term. This time he'll have an online option, but normally it's more on a in-person kind of setup in LA. Last but not least, we'll definitely get back to that when we discuss design. I hope to learn a lot of architecture design for entertainment with him. But two of the books that I'll be using are this one, Global History of Architecture, focuses a lot on functionality and plan view, site planning for historical buildings, as well as the history of landscape design also helps understand how to create beauty combining architecture and nature. So a lot to learn from that. So I hope this was informative and you've learned something. I'll definitely get back to this topic once I have more and have done my homework on the course. But we can already learn a lot from just looking at his amazing work, as we've seen before. So let's get our primitive construction very solid, combine them and break them down to find newer and great shapes and volumes and perspective to create our architecture designs, as well as use shadow projection and value grouping to have an overall pleasing visual result. I hope you all have a great day, and I definitely will see you in another video.